If you love positivity, then oh my gosh, do I have the episode for you. Today I have none other than the brains behind The Power of Positivity. Kristen Butler has over 33 million followers following her on her journey to positivity. We've got her amazing book here, The Comfort Zone, and today she's going to talk about her rebrand, The Keys to Positivity. She was just barely this week on the billboards in Times Square. Her journey is amazing. Her story is incredible. And who can't have a little extra positivity in their lives? Stay tuned, like and subscribe, and most importantly, enjoy the episode. Wherever you are and however you are listening, thank you for being back with us on another episode of Winning the Moment. Today, I have another member of the Book Thinkers Mafia with me. I love the Book Thinkers community. They bring such amazing people together. And my guest today is Kristen Butler, the author of The Comfort Zone and her new rendition, The Key of Positivity, and also the mind behind The Power of Positivity. Kristen, thank you so much for being here with us.
Hello, Cody. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, it's been such a pleasure following your journey since I met you in Columbus right before the Lewis Howes event last year and got to see you give a talk and learn more about you. And it's been so fun. You did 75 Hard at the beginning of the year, which was, I loved following that. And I don't know where you live, but wherever you live is beautiful. When you go on your walks in the forest, it's like you live in some magical wonderland.
Yeah, we're in Asheville, North Carolina, and I started 75 Hard in December when Nick from the Book Thinkers community invited me. And it was really cold, but it was such a good challenge for me because I actually kind of avoided the cold in the wintertime.
Sure.
But this gave me a chance to get outside and like embrace the cold and actually begin to love it. So it was a really good time for me. And yeah, the views are just a bonus.
Yeah, I grew up in Wyoming, so I avoid the cold at all costs. And I know that it's so good for you. Like I've read Wim Hof's book, and Megan and I just barely bought she was like, I want to buy a cold plunge tub. I was like, cool, like sure. And she's like, all right, I found one. I was like, how much is it? It's like $7,000. I was like, oh no, that's a hard no. We're not doing that. I was like, we already have a bathtub. Like, let's just figure that out. And so we bought this little box that has tubes in it, and you put it in your outside your bathtub, and it circulates the water and cools it down. And we've had it for probably a month. We have yet to use it because both of us are not fans of the cold. So it's like I just gotta jump in and embrace it because I know it's so good for you. I just can't seem to get myself to do it.
Yeah, I haven't seen one of those. Actually, I felt the same way. I'm like, I better get into this and make it a habit before I commit to 7K.
Yeah.
We actually got like an outdoor one. They're like $150 on Amazon when it was in the winter. So it cooled itself down on its own. And after about 30 seconds, though, you really start to just kind of have this inner peace and calm. So I was able to work up to like 3 minutes. So if I can do it, you too can totally do it.
What temperature is yours at?
When I did it in the wintertime, it was 35.
Oh my goodness.
40.
Get the hell out of here. That is just absolutely absurd.
Yeah. Yeah. After about 3 minutes, you start shivering and you're like, okay, I got to get out of here. But actually a cold plunge is much easier than a cold shower. So if you've ever done a cold shower, switch it to a cold plunge because you can actually submerge yourself and actually find that inner calm. Whereas like a cold shower, it's just like sporadic, right?
Well, again, the flowing water is worse, right? Because it's like constantly new water, So there's the spa in Vegas that we go to that has like all the different pools, all the different temperatures, right? And it was at like 60 degrees. And I told my friend, I was like, oh yeah, I did the cold plunge. Like it was tough. I did it. And he's like, how cold? I was like, 60 degrees. Like that's not a cold plunge. And I was like, felt cold to me. It took a lot of effort to get in there, but it's pretty commendable. I mean, I know obviously you're building such mental fortitude, and it's like, can you build that mental strength to mind over matter truly is what it is. But that's enough cold plunge talk. I would love to get into, because I don't really know your backstory. So when you spoke at Book Thinkers, Jason Wolbers told me that like you were the inspiration for his book. And I think it was your journal that he did. And he was like, oh, I love her journal. I buy it for everyone as a gift. Like it's just the most amazing thing. And I know you had your Power of Positivity Instagram. And so I'm curious how did positivity become a part of your life? What's the origin story to where you are today?
That's such a good question. And I love Jason because his story kind of is similar to what I was going through. So I was so grateful that I could help him through that. And so many people in our community say that same thing. Like I was at a rock bottom or a really low point, and positivity helped pull me out. So thanks for sharing that. I think it's been, wow, 15 years since we started Power of Positivity, but a few years before that, I actually hit a rock bottom. And, I know people say that a lot, but for me, literally every area of my life was falling apart. And I was someone who really prided myself on being able to hold it together no matter what happened. But at that time, I had lost a very successful business after cycles and cycles of burnout. My health was, wow, it was out of control. I was overweight, very overweight. Um, and a doctor had told me, like, hey, Kristen, you're never going to have children. You have PCOS, your health is at this place where, like, I don't even see you being able to conceive. And there were so many things that were out of balance because I always prioritized work over family and fun. And so I found myself in bed for 2 weeks straight. Like I didn't even care about getting up to brush my teeth. I didn't want to pick up my phone. Like I thought that, hey, I had failed too much. My life is too far gone. Like I didn't even want to live.
Wow.
And I really credit the power of positivity, not just in mindset, but embracing a positive lifestyle for my transformation. Because after a few years of not just changing the way I thought, embracing gratitude, affirmations, and positive thinking in general, but I also was taking positive habits. I was taking small positive steps, working out, walking around the block, even if it was just a few blocks that eventually turned into miles. I was taking these small positive steps. And after a few years, every area of my life was turned around. And I felt so good. And I thought, wow, what was it? Like, what was it for this whole transformation? What was the one thing, if I could narrow it down to one thing? And it was the power of positivity. And so that's where the brand started.
And what was your catalyst at that time? Like, how did you discover that positivity? Was there someone out there that was inspirational to you or a book that you read? Like, what was that thing that started your journey of getting out of that place?
It was a lot of little things, but I did start talking to a therapist, and she really brought me back to myself and who I really was, that I was this positive person and always saw the best of things and was always a dreamer. And it really reminded me that over the years, I had let so many layers of other people and their opinions and what they thought I should be or what I should do or who I was kind of undermined what I believed about myself. And it was a really awakening moment because I realized that I wasn't living for who I really was and being authentic to myself. And that's why I was always burning out. That's why I was unhappy. And when I started returning to that place and prioritizing things that made me feel good, things that were aligned with who I was, that were comfortable, and I found my comfort zone, and that place was where I started to actually experience joy and happiness again and well-being. And yeah, it took a few years for me to really turn things around. But when I started to see the effects over just a few weeks and then a few months and then a few years, these small steps creating small, results, it really changed everything.
What a quandary that we put ourselves in the situations where, for whatever reason, I don't even know how we get there, but we start doing things for other people, you know?
Mm.
And so it's like you're not serving yourself, and maybe you haven't even asked the question of what do you want as an individual, but what do you think got you to that place where you stopped showing up for yourself and were ultimately showing up for others?
you know, People pleasing for approval, believing that other people knew better than I did. I think, yeah, I just started to undermine my own wisdom and my own knowledge and who I was. I feel like a lot of us go through that, like in our
For
early
sure.
20s. We're just trying to like figure out life and work hard and get by. And, a lot of people who care about us, they want the best for us, but it doesn't mean that their opinions of what we should be doing or who we are actually true.
Yeah. Is it so after you were, starting those small habits that were getting you going in the right direction, is the first thing that you did with this overarching brand, was it that Instagram handle, The Power of Positivity?
Actually, back then, Instagram was not around.
Oh
It
yeah, because
was,
15 years ago, I guess, right?
yeah, Facebook was though. And at that time, I was freelancing. I had a lot of clients. I was working on their social media and their web pages and their design. And that was something that was really passionate for me. And when Facebook started pages, I was like, well, I can't make this about work because at that time, I was prioritizing work-life balance. And I knew that if I had made the page about work, that I could burn out, right? I could just constantly focus on work. And so that's when I thought, well, what am I really passionate about? Like, what created all of this change? And so, yeah, that's where I started Power Positivity because I thought if I can change my life, just me, then other people can do that same thing because I'm
Yeah.
no one special. It's like anyone could do this. And if I could change and make that much of a leap, then anyone could do it small or large. They could change and turn their life around with positive thinking and positive action steps.
So what were you on that page there on Facebook? Were you just giving people like daily tips and tricks, or like what was the premise of that page?
It was just quotes. Like if a quote inspired me, then I would share it with someone else. It was like, okay, this is a daily reminder for me and a commitment that I'm making to myself. And if this can help someone else too, then great. And so it was really just me sharing what I was inspired by with other people. So it was quotes. Eventually, it turned into affirmations. And then over the years, it took a few years, but my journalism background led me to start writing articles about
Okay.
things that created a positive lifestyle, foods that were healthy, activities that were nourishing, um, the psychology and the studies that I was reading, like all of those things that I loved. I started writing articles on them and started sharing them with our community.
Well, what's amazing is like that Instagram channel now has 9.5 million followers.
Yeah, actually, the Facebook is 33 million. Um,
Wow.
yeah, the Facebook page, which that's the original one. And then when Instagram
33
started,
million.
yeah. And then when Instagram started, we made a handle and we just started sharing our content there. I don't know how many years ago that was when Instagram started, but we also have another page, Positive Energy. It's just kind of like a sister page as
Yeah.
well.
So how does it feel to have 33 million people decide that I'm interested in what you have to say? I mean, that is remarkable.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Over the years, that many people that love the brand. When I first started it, though, I kind of jokingly, just because I'm someone who really loves to set these big, huge goals and dream, and I said, I'd love for Power Positivity to be a household name. And I think when we dream these big dreams without like expectations and not taking ourselves too seriously, it can really happen because when I look back, so many things in my life actually have happened, like the billboard this past week and these things where it's like I affirmed it and I put it out there and it actually happened not right away, years and years or decades later, but when we think big like that, we never know when it can actually happen or if it can happen because it can.
It's amazing. I think people struggle with it because it seems too easy, right? And so it's like,
Mm,
oh, that can't be real, but it just is. Like what you put into your mind and the intentional thought that you put out there for your future. And sometimes, as a business owner, right, as an entrepreneur, something might happen, and I'll be like, "Ooh, shoot! Well, if that happens, then this would happen, and how would I adjust?" And I have to like tell myself to stop thinking that because none of those thoughts are positive. Like if that
mm,
client left, or if this thing didn't work out, or this employee had to go, it's like if I can't feed into that. And I'll never forget, we were reading a book with like our leadership team, and I can't even remember what the book was, but it was about basically the premise of what you just said, thinking big, putting out intention. And I realized, like, in that roundtable discussion, like, wow, my problem is I've never dreamed big enough, because like so much of what I was after was security, right? Like I didn't care about a big house or big fortune. I just like wanted to know my family was okay. And so like that's what I was in pursuit of. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I realized like I'm just limiting myself because that's what I was in pursuit of. And so, and this was like in 2020. So it's like there was lots of reasons to be like concerned, you know? But instead I was like, you know what? I just got to dream bigger. And then all of these incredible things have happened since that time. My book coming out, my podcast, our new house, all of these amazing, like my TED Talk, all these things that I've wanted my whole life. And it literally was just this little shift of thinking like, oh yeah, I'm just going to want more. I'm going to say I can do more. And that has been the most positive, impactful thing in my life. And in many ways, it's not even like my habits changed dramatically. It was literally, I just let my mind stop putting that roadblock in the way of what I wanted.
You know, I love that. I feel like, did you think your actions before that really aligned with what has happened over the last few years? Because a lot of times it's either a tweak in action or a tweak in thought. And you're just so much closer than you realize.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because someone else just, I think it was last week, said the same thing, or maybe it was a podcast I was listening to, that like these incredible amounts of success aren't that far away. They feel like they're forever away, but it's just a few small decisions or behaviors away in reality. And I think it started with just the thoughts, but then as the things started to happen, it was like, oh, well, now I can do this, this, and that. And then these things are going to happen. And even as we sit here today, this is episode 58 of the podcast, you know, like a year and a half ago, I didn't even have Instagram. I didn't have any social media, you know, like none of that existed. And I wasn't giving talks, you know, I certainly wasn't going to give a TED Talk. And so it's like, of course, my actions had to align with those things that I wanted. But I think I finally allowed myself to believe that the things I want are achievable, because why think otherwise? What's the alternative? Saying it's not possible? Like you're just already creating a roadblock, and for what reason? So I think, you know, to have you share that mindset is so important for the listeners. And I think the only caveat that I'll give the people listening is don't think because it's easy, it doesn't work, because it does.
That's so good. And it's so true. It's easier than you think. And that feeling of hard is what stops a lot of us. But a lot of these things aren't hard. They just take a few intentional steps. And when you map that out and then just keep taking that next step, it's like, oh, this is actually fun and easier than I thought. And so another thing I think is that people kind of worry about, well, if I set this really high expectation, then I'm going to disappoint myself if I don't meet it.
Yeah.
But when I look back, it's like, maybe it didn't happen exactly when I thought, but I was so much further than I would have been if I didn't think
Absolutely.
bigger, if I didn't take those actions. And really there's no regrets then. It's just enjoying the journey, and you just keep plugging away.
Yeah, no, I love that. In fact, Vivek Ramaswamy was on a podcast yesterday, and he said, I got some great advice when I was younger, and that's that it takes just as much effort to be good at something small as it does to be good at something huge. And it's like, wow, he's so right, you know, because even in my world, like in my hospitality space, I've got a property that has 12 rooms and I have a property that has 100 rooms. It takes just as much effort to do either one of those, you know, so why not go after 100 rooms versus 12? And I think that's in life. I think you kind of hit it on the head, that I think people are afraid of failure. And so they think like, oh, I'm going to disappoint myself if I dream so big. But the thing is, failure is just that next step to success, right? Because it's just, oh, that didn't work. So now I've got to refocus and refigure, but it doesn't mean you can never get there. It's just the path I took, I just got to pivot.
Absolutely. And there's always doors open. So true.
And I think that, and I don't know for you, but I think so much of positivity, because I would consider myself a very positive person, because why, again, what's the alternative? You know, why not be positive? Nothing bad can happen from it, only good, right? And I think that leads into the universe and putting your faith in something bigger than us, and that if you do the things that you know you need to do in order to be where you want to be, it's just a matter of time before it'll happen. And you kind of alluded to that earlier. It's not like if you said, I want to be on a billboard in New York Times, it's going to happen in a week. It might take 15 years of aggressively pursuing positivity before you have that billboard. But now last week you did. I mean, what did that feel like for you to be standing in Times Square and have you and your book on the screen behind you? Like, I can't imagine what that was like.
It was so surreal. And the minute I saw it, I started crying. And here I had my hair and makeup done. I'm about to get pictures, because the company was like, "Hey, you need to get pictures. You need to, you would love it." And I'm like, "Really? Me?" And so I was a little bashful about it. And when I got there, I cried because it was so surreal. And it's just amazing that positivity has made it this far, and here it is in Times Square. My mom reminded me, she's like, "Remember when you said when you were 12 and you were watching the Macy's Day Parade, you were like, I'm going to be on a billboard one day." And that was also surreal. It was like, wow, I declared that as a child. And I think we need to go back to what were some of the things that we were saying even then about our life, because it's like we knew so much more than we realized about ourselves and about where we wanted to go.
Yeah, that actually gave me the goosebumps as you share that story because it just is so incredible. And it's one of those moments in time where it's like you really get to take it in and be like, I did something, And
Yeah.
and I was thinking like how crazy for the people walking around who are there on vacation or going to work or just living their lives. And yet here you are holding your book like in the street, and then boom, there it is, And it's like,
Yeah.
and even to hear you say like you legit still have imposter syndrome because you just barely said who, me. It's like, yeah, you with the 33 million followers and the face on Times Square, like, yeah, but I think it's important to hear that because when people don't have 33 million followers and they don't have a billboard in Times Square and they don't have a best-selling book, they feel like who, me. And so they feel like in that moment of who, me, well, I wouldn't feel that way if I had all of these things. But the fact of the matter is, we all feel that way just on different segments of our journey, right? So you're just at a
Mhm.
different place. But even with all of those accolades, your response is, oh, who, me, And I think that's
Yeah,
just something we'll always be up against.
I think it's important to stay humble no matter how much you achieve. Even when I was staying there taking photos, I was so bashful, right? But I was also enjoying the experience. Like it was the full spectrum. And my family was there, and I had some friends there, and they were like, "Yeah, that's my mom," or "Hey, I
Yeah.
know her." And I'm like, guys, stop, right? I mean, it's good to stay humble because, otherwise it can go to your head. We are all human and we're perfectly imperfect. And so if you give yourself a break and take some of the pressure off, it doesn't make things feel so intimidating. Like I think otherwise I might have been anxious or, nervous or something. And I wasn't any of those things. I was excited, but a little bashful and humble.
I love that. It's interesting how we work as humans in that way. Because even like for me with my TED Talk, it was something I'd been in pursuit of since I saw my first one, probably 20 years ago. Like it was a bucket list. At some point in my life, I will do this thing. And then even as I did it, I was still a little bit like bashful to talk about it or and even with some of the things that I've been able to achieve, we had this conversation before with another guest of like, sometimes I don't even know when people say, what do you do, how to respond to that? Because there's some really exciting things I do, but I feel like answering in that way, I'll almost feel like an imposter. And so it's like, it's
Mhm.
this internal dialogue that it's just a me thing. It's no one else's fault but my own. But it is this unique thing that as you're in pursuit of your dreams, what would cause me to be anything other than just so proud of what that's happened. But yet I find myself diminishing it oftentimes, like kind of to what you said, like n- not wanting to overstand in the spotlight, even though like that was your moment.
Yeah, 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 totally. Even there was that was like the bus drop off for the lower loop in Manhattan in New York City. And it was so funny because they would just sit on the bus for 15 minutes watching me, right? So there was so many people in that area as it was. Um, but yeah, just knowing that. hey, it took a lot to get here, and enjoying that moment, being in the present and embracing it and living it to the fullest. I think that's all we can do, right?
Did you have people coming up to you asking for your pictures and stuff when, like, even if they didn't know you,
Yeah.
because obviously, like, there you
Yeah,
are on
some
the
people were
billboard?
like going live, and it was kind of funny, right? Because they put it together like, wait, she's right there. It was a very large billboard, and then they're like, wait, she's there, and then she's there. She must be someone important.
Yeah.
I'm just an everyday person like everybody else. I just want people to know that anybody can do this. You just have to align your thoughts with where you want to go and take action towards it. And you can do literally anything.
I love that because you can. But it starts with the belief that you can, because it's not true until you think it, right? And so, talking about, so you were there in New York Times for would you call it a rebrand? Was that what you consider it for the new book, or a
The key to
relaunch?
positivity,
Yeah.
yes. The
So,
paperback version, every publisher kind of comes out with a paperback within a year of the hardcover. And the publisher said, hey, your brand is the power of positivity. And I feel like if we rebrand the cover, and the title, that it would align more with your audience. And I have seen the flow of that. People avoid their comfort zones. And so I didn't want them avoiding the book. And they need to understand truly how powerful this really is when we embrace what's comfortable and then we expand from that place.
no, I totally agree, and I've got the hardcover copy here. Was lucky enough to get a signed copy from you at the Book Thinkers event, and I do love the new branding and the fact that you're leaning in on positivity, because the comfort zone doesn't necessarily elude that positivity mindset. Now, it says the founder of positivity on it, but it doesn't just grab you with that. Where the keys of positivity does, and where you've built this positive brand over such a long period of time, I think it's smart to lean into that. And
Mhm.
I'm curious what the evolution of, because the journal is something that Jason had shared with me was so beneficial for him. And so, at what point in that journey, from like the Facebook pages to the articles, where did the journal fall into that mix?
I published a journal in 2021, and yeah, I had been affirming that I was going to write a book and publish a book for years and years and years. In fact, actually, was when I was in third grade, I told my third grade teacher, I'm going to write a book one day. It's going to change the world. And so it was 2021. I was in a coffee shop with Lewis Howes, and I was telling him about the comfort zone. And he said to me, Kristen, you gotta write a book about positivity. Like, do something smaller, self-publish it. Just get to know the industry, but just do it, because if you've been talking about writing this book the comfort zone's a longer read, but he said, do something shorter. Just put something out there to your audience. They're hungry for it. They need it. And so he encouraged me to self-publish. I did it through Amazon KDP. And he gave me a deadline. He said, 4 months. I know you can do it. And I was like, wow, that's a really short deadline. But I had already had so much of the content and the ideas. I just actually didn't take the action to publish it. It felt like it was such a big jump, right? And it actually took me 6 months, but that's where the 3 Minute Positivity Journal came from. And it was with the intention of helping my community take action,
Yeah.
because, years and years of all these quotes, all these articles, all this information, and there were still so many people struggling and writing to us and saying, like, maybe this doesn't work. Like, I'm not seeing changes in my life. And I thought, they're busy, but they need to take action. And so I tried to make it super easy for anyone, no matter what kind of schedule they had. And it's been really successful.
So, is that like a 3 minutes every day for years, like 365 pages you can do it every day, or?
Yeah, it's 3 minutes in the morning and 3 minutes at night. And the first journal is a 60-day journey. And so I
Okay.
have like a 50-page introduction to positivity and why they're going to be doing what they're doing every day. And then it's 3 minutes in the morning. They do affirmations, they journal. There's kind of a mental health check in there, a self-care check. And then in the evening, they kind of end their day in a restful way by just taking 3 minutes to journal, to reflect on their wins and what went right. Because I think it's so important to set our day up in a positive way and then end our day in a restful way so we can recharge, sleep well, and then begin the next day positive.
Well, yeah, and then you go to bed with those thoughts, right? Subconsciously, you're now thinking
Exactly.
about the successes you had. It's funny because I've created like for the premise of winning the moment, like a little one pager I do at the end of the day to and focus and invigorate like all of those successes, because I think so often in life you forget what you even accomplished. Like you come home and your spouse says, how was your day? It's like, oh, it's good, but you're not really like diving into what was good or what made it good. And even like we'll do a segue in our meetings. You have to say one business best and one personal best for the week, and it's
Mm,
amazing to watch people struggle to think of something. And it's like,
wow.
you're obviously not putting enough thought into your activities if you can't even think of one thing in the last 7 days that was exciting for you, because it could be so small. It could be having coffee with a friend. I mean, even
Yeah.
something as small as that could be like, that was great, And so I love that idea. And I read Jason's book, Power of the Positive Mind, which I know you were the inspiration behind that. And I loved it because you read one section every day, and his was a 90-day thing. And I think anytime that you can get people to take action, because it's one thing to say it, but to physically do it. And for whatever
Mhm.
reason, when pen hits paper, it's different than even if
Yes.
you just had the thought exercise for 3 minutes. Having that pen touch the paper makes a different connection. So you subtly name dropped Lewis Howes. How does one have coffee with Lewis Howes? How did that come about? Were you on his podcast or?
He was in my area in Asheville. I think his brother lives in this area. And it was a weird time, right? It was after COVID, and then it was when things started coming back and people started meeting up. So we were just kind of hanging out and just kind of reflecting on what we were both doing. And yeah, he was very encouraging. And I needed that because I think I put too much pressure on publishing a book. And it's actually, and you have a book and you understand this too, it's actually simpler when you break it down and you just go for it. It seems
Yeah.
like it's so monumental, but look at some of these people in the world, like John Maxwell, he has 100 books, right? If
Yeah.
we take the pressure off and don't take it so seriously, I mean, take it seriously writing it, but I mean on yourself to publish it, you're going to do it. And that's what
Yeah.
happened here, where I'm like, okay, I've got a deadline and I can do this.
It really is that old adage of like one foot in front of the other. It's like you just
Mhm.
have to take a step. You don't have to run the race today, but just take a
Yeah.
step forward. And for me in my process, I would just set a time, uh, one day a week, every morning. I'd block out time, and it's like I just knew, okay, at minimum, I've got a couple hours every day on this day, and I'll just keep moving it forward.
Exactly. You're so right. It's like if you just give yourself that space, even if it's just an hour, even if it's just a half hour to say, I'm
Right.
going to work on a book, you get so much more done than you realize. And soon enough, it's like the book is done. And it's much easier than we think.
And sometimes there's something too, like a 2 hour block. Because if I said I'm going to work on the book for 8 hours every Thursday, I would have eventually filled that time with some other things. So it would have been like, can you take a meeting on Thursday? I'd have been like, yeah, I could fit in an hour, no problem. But when you have those 2 hours, you guard it with like sanctity of like, oh, no, no, I only have 2 hours. Like I'm not going to be scrolling. I'm not going to be doing anything else. Like this is the time to do it. And so there's something about, time blocking like that. But I'm curious. So obviously you've got, a multitude of time with positivity, and you've got your book, Keys to Positivity. What would you say to the listeners, Cliff Notes version, a couple of the most important keys to positivity that you found in your life?
Mm. I know everyone says it and it's cliche these days, but gratitude. Gratitude is so powerful, and embodying it in a way that you're not just saying, I am grateful for in this really routine way, but literally living your day and harnessing and grounding yourself in the present moment to just savor what feels good, savor what you're grateful for. When you pick up a practice, that's important, and I'm not like devaluing that, but writing down 10 things over and over can become too repetitious for some people. And so what I like to do is just take a few minutes, breathe, and just truly feel what I'm grateful for in my body, in my life right now. And so gratitude definitely is one of the biggest keys. I would also say to stop shaming your comfort zone. Before I changed my life, I was always trying to step out of my comfort zone, get uncomfortable. I shame myself for fun, for balance, for taking time for me. And I just constantly burned out. And my life wasn't fulfilling. And I had anxiety and panic attacks, and I was depressed. But once I let go of the shame and started to actually ask myself, what's one thing that I can do today that's fun? What's one thing that would feel good? And in a truly nourishing way that helped my well-being, right? But when I started doing that, I started to get comfortable with more. I started to actually prioritize what felt good. I was able to set healthier boundaries and begin to expand my comfort zone. And that's when I really learned that our comfort zone is not this small, static place. It's actually really important to feel safe and grounded wherever we go. And we want to expand. We want to be comfortable with more and more and more and more and more. And that's how we can truly live a positive lifestyle, when we let go of that shame and discover what feels good, what's natural to us, what we want to pursue. These kind of questions are game changers to success and living a life that's fulfilling.
I think that's incredible, because if you think back to the sad, depressed, overweight Kristen, and if you would have told that Kristen, like, you're going to do 75 hard and then you're going to keep going, you would have been like, that's way out of my comfort zone. That couldn't have been like, I couldn't even imagine how unfathomable that would have been to that Kristen of that period of time, right? But you make all of those steps, and so your comfort zone expands, allowing you to do something that is very challenging, right? But now that is inside of your comfort zone because you've grown it so large.
Yeah, I love that. And I do feel like 75 hard, no matter where you are in your journey, is almost like a deep level of self-care. Like you were mentioning earlier, I had that time block for 2 hours, so I didn't take that call, or I wasn't scrolling. When you do 75 hard, you're giving back to yourself, and you are setting healthy boundaries like, hey, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I have this commitment. And so it's a really great way to set boundaries for yourself and other people, and to fill your cup. So I actually really believe that anyone can do it at any, physical level, because you're taking 45 minutes, no matter what it is, and doing something that's challenging you physically. And then you're going for a walk outside or a run, depending on where you are. And all the different components, reading a book, drinking your water, eating healthy. It's like these things are nourishing. They fill your cup. Like, this is so important to do. I just love that challenge, actually. And so that's why I continued, because it was like, this is only adding value to my life and only helping me to feel better and to support my mission.
Well, it kind of goes back to like, what bad comes of being positive. It's the same thing. What bad comes of being healthy and intentional with your decisions? Nothing, you know? And what's interesting about gratitude, talking about it being cliche, it only is because it's true. And anyone who I've, especially after now having a multitude of guests on my podcast, and reading other authors and listening to other thought leaders, I can say that one of the commonalities of anyone doing something inspiring or worth doing, gratitude plays a role in what they do. And another book thinkers mafia, Marcus Aurelius, the author of Play a Bigger Game, he had a great way of thinking about gratitude. I had him on the podcast, and he said, as to what you mentioned, it's hard, like if you just say write down 10 things you're grateful for, because after like 7 days, maybe it's just the same, and then you feel like you're losing the value. But he said, I want you to think about gratitude in a way of, what if you didn't have it? So if you weren't grateful for it, it disappeared. And then all of a sudden, like, I'm grateful for this chair because I don't want to stand and do this podcast or like be on my knees. And so this chair that would never make my 10 things I'm grateful for, all of a sudden is now on this list. I'm grateful for this little monitor in front of me because it allows me to feel like you're in the room with me. I wouldn't naturally be grateful for this insignia monitor, but today I am, and so I loved his perspective of how we thought about gratitude. And as we think about, you've talked a lot about these things that you've accomplished, and the time and the thoughts on positivity. And so I'm curious what's next for you, if you've thought about that. Like, what's your big, hairy, audacious goal now? Like, you've accomplished so much. What's on the horizon? What are you after next?
That's a great question. I got to be more like you. I got to get a TED Talk. That's on the list for this year, because I'm really excited to up-level my speaking career, and I know a TED Talk would help with that. I'm also focused on being more of a teacher in the community. So going live more, creating more courses, and truly making this community a community of transformation, a community that takes action. We just don't read quotes and learn information, but we're literally every day taking action to be a better human being.
I love that because I mean, there's nothing bad about reading good quotes. That's good for your brain and good for your spirit. But you've got to also tie it to doing something, moving that needle forward. And I think it's very transparent, even just through this conversation, that you really care about your community and their growth. You're not just providing things for them just for the sake of providing it. You want to see them have the same positive impacts it's had in your life and theirs, which I think is really commendable. So one thing I love to ask for the guests on my podcast is, what is the biggest win you've ever had in your life?
The biggest win that I've ever had was having my two girls, my two children. So I'm so proud to be a mom and being told, 17 years ago, hey, you have PCOS, you have this many cysts on your ovaries. Like, I'm so sorry, but you're never going to have children. It's being a woman that was so detrimental to me. It was like, wow, like, oh my gosh, like I always envisioned having this family. And now here I have two beautiful daughters and they're just like my whole world. So that would definitely be my biggest accomplishment.
I kind of thought you were going to say that because you shared with us earlier that there was a time you thought you wouldn't be able to have kids. And so I wondered if that might be where you go. Something that I thought of too, speaking about like growing your speaking career. I know that I obviously got to see you speak in person. Is that something that you spend a lot of time doing now? Has that been a part of this positivity story, going around and doing keynotes or breakouts and things like that?
I've done two this year and then some online. So two in person and a few online. And I do want to expand that. And so really creating content that can help business owners, but also inspirational content. I'm working on that right now, but it's definitely a goal. It's only something I've been doing the last few years, but I find that in person, the transformation can happen so much quicker.
Yeah.
People reach out to me and they're like, wow, I heard you speak. And then I started implementing things and my whole life's changing. I mean, I'm hearing things from my books, of course, and from my community.
Yeah.
But in person is so much different. And so I want to work on doing that more and traveling more, but still taking time with my kids. So it's going to be a process.
Well, did you get to see Janae Brown? Did you get to see her Power of the Pause talk at the Book Thinkers event?
I didn't.
So
I don't think
she was awesome. She has a TED talk, and I found myself watching speakers in a different capacity now that I'm in pursuit of that, right? So now I watch a speaker very much how I would watch like a sporting event. Like now I'm watching what they do and how they move and how they change their voice. And so I'm so much more interested in the art of speaking than just the content I'm receiving. And when she spoke, I was like, damn, she's doing something different. I can tell there's intentional thought in all the things that she does. And so I went up to her after and asked her, like, what was her background? What was her story? And she went to Heroic Public Speaking.
Oh,
Yes. Are you familiar with them?
I have heard about them. I think Nick works with them.
Yeah, he just did it. And he signed up for their course. So I went with another speaker friend of mine in January because of Janae. She set me up with them, or Jeanette, sorry. And it's Amy and Michael Poehler, and they have degrees in drama. And so like they have a theater background. So they're taking that theater and bringing it to speaking. And so even how you use the stage and the different parts of the stage. And it was amazing. They were so skilled that someone would go up and they'd be like, do your opening. And they'd get on stage and they would do it. And they'd be like, change this, take that word out, raise your voice here and take a step to the left. And they would do it and it was completely different. It was like, holy shit, this is amazing. And so Nick and John Skomsky both just went a couple weeks ago. And I know Nick signed up for it too, but that is one, if you haven't done, I would go to their 2-day course because it was like, it was so mind blowing to see how quickly you could advance your skill set with just a little bit of direction and coaching.
Oh, I love that. Coaching has really changed a lot of elements in my career. I worked with Jess Estrom. She is Mic Drop Academy. And I did that, I think 2 or 3 years ago. And that was amazing. And then I've worked with several coaches. Last year, I worked with a media coach. And then I also had a coach at the beginning of the year for a recent keynote that I did. And it is very transformative to have that like on the spot, just
Yeah.
correction and guidance. For me, I'm definitely working more on storytelling because I think I realize even when I'm reading, I'm not that interested in stories. So I'm trying to be more interested in stories even when I'm reading so that when I'm speaking, I can storytell better. I don't
Yes.
know about you, but storytelling is it's definitely an area I'm working on as far as speaking.
I was fortunate to like I jumped into sales very young, and my dad has like that salesperson persona, and I got into sales, and what I learned quickly about sales is that it is a smaller version of storytelling. So it's always
Mm,
been something that, and I understood that I was more successful if I connected in a story sense with my customers,
mm,
regardless of what the product was, and so that's something that not to say I couldn't be better at it because I certainly could, but I
yeah,
definitely try and incorporate like anytime I give a talk, I try and incorporate stories throughout because that's what I feel like will engage the audience more. There's a
yeah.
great author, Kendra, can't remember her last name, but she wrote a book called Stories That Stick, and she has a whole course
Wow.
on specifically how to use storytelling to be a better keynote speaker. And
Ooh, I
she's
love
awesome. I
that.
would look it up. Stories That Stick. It's a
Yeah.
great Kendra Scott, I think. Amazing book. But one thing that I love to ask, because of course winning the moment is about wins, but we've kind of alluded to this, but you can't win without loss and you can't grow without pain. And so I'm curious, what's the biggest loss that you've ever had?
Oh, the biggest loss. What's coming to mind is when I was 15 years old and I lost my grandfather. Is that it's not a loss of work though,
Oh no, I don't
loss
want
of
to.
a human.
I don't want to
But
set parameters on what a loss has to be. I would love just your perception of
yeah,
it.
I guess I would say I learned so much, but grief is challenging, right? And so navigating that is interesting. I would say that's definitely because to me, he was like a father. He was like the most important person in my life. And losing someone like that at such a young age, it definitely motivated me um, to make him proud one day, right? But then it's like, well, he's gone. And so that was probably, I'd say, the toughest loss that I had.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So now what I'd love to know is I like to ask people what some of their favorite books they've read. And obviously, as an author, you can't use your own, but what have been some of the most impactful books in your life?
The 4 hour work week was huge for me because I was freelancing and I was an entrepreneur and I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, but it really helped me to harness different factors to make being an entrepreneur more efficient.
Sure.
It's like there's so many amazing tips in there. And he really expands your mindset on like, hey, you don't have to work as much as you think, you can delegate. And so that also really helps me with that work-life balance that I'm always prioritizing. I also think Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. That was a very transformative book because she's talking about how your thoughts really impact not just your life, but your body and, illnesses and things that you experience. And I really put a lot of what that book taught me into practice, and it made a huge difference. I would also say the Bible, because that's just old school inspiration that is just full of truth. And so that always is very helpful to me as well.
So I went to this conference. Do you know who Sean Cannell is?
If I saw his face, probably.
He's big in the YouTube space, and so he puts on this conference called Grow with Video. And
Mm,
he had a pastor come and speak at it, and this pastor talked about the Bible, and he said that they had these data scientists who did research on the Bible to really just say what are the odds of this being real, right?
mm,
And I'm a very statistical person, so I was like, oh, I'm interested. I'm not a religious person, but this is fascinating. And so they went through and said, there's and I'm going to butcher the stats. I don't remember it, but something like 300 different authors over 1500 years, and the story drops and picks up in different languages, and it all just flows. And it said there were certain things, proclamations of events that would happen. And so these data scientists went in and did the research on what are the odds. They took all of the events and they distilled it down to like, well, let's just take 40 of them. So let's say there's 1,500, but we're only going to use 40 for this experiment. And what are the odds that these 40 proclamations end up coming true? And he said that the probability of that would have been like if you took a silver dollar and you marked it, and that silver dollar stacked up on top of each other was bigger than the earth, and you had to go find that silver dollar with one shot, that is a probability of what happened in the Bible coming true. And
Wow.
I found that to be, now again, I very, very much butchered that, but it was so fascinating because no one had ever explained it to me in that way. And it was really like, wow, this is like, that is so incredible. So I think that's really cool that you put that in there as one of the books.
Nice. Thank you. And I love that stat.
Are you a pretty avid reader yourself?
A few times a week for sure. But I think looking back through my whole life, like that's been a cornerstone. And when I was really down and depressed, that's when I literally had no faith and thought that, maybe there is no God, or maybe God, God's forgot about me. And so those were very negative belief systems that didn't serve me. And when I have more positive belief systems and I read the Bible and I prioritize my relationship spiritually, life is much more in the flow and much better. So,
has that always been a part of your life, or was that something you found through your journey and power of positivity?
I think since I was a young child, for sure. Yeah. And not in a huge way, but in my own way, for sure.
Absolutely. So then the final question that I have for you, and it's one that I think is so important, and and I'll preface it why I ask it, but you talked about like work-life balance and doing things for others and working so much. And I certainly found myself in that same category of like, I thought I just had to work so much, and it was almost like a badge of honor. Like, I'm going to work more than you do, whoever you was, right? Like, just if you show up to work and I'm at work, I'm not leaving until after you've left, And I thought that was success for a long time. And certainly I thought monetary gains was a reflection of success. And it took me so long to shift my perspective and definition of the word. And where it really clicked for me is when I was speaking in college classrooms, and it's a question I'm asked almost every time, is how do you become successful? And I realized the flaw with the question is that they didn't have me define it first, because that person and myself may have completely different aspirations. And so if I was to give him my keys to success, it would ultimately, they would be the keys to get to here. But if he wanted to get over here, it would have zero value, and it'd be more detrimental, because then he would start down the wrong path and have to double back and go so much further to get to where he wanted to get. And so part of what I'm trying to do is gather all of this different data points from all these amazing individuals like yourself. So when I come out with my second book, because winning the moment is not about how to do something or how to get somewhere. It's more about the why. Like, this is good for you, kind of like being positive, like this is good for you, and these are all the reasons it's good for you, and I'm not defining what you should or shouldn't be doing. Just do something, right? Just take that step every day. But I think there is an evolution of time where it's like, so once someone are taking those steps, it's like, okay, well, now where should I be headed? And so I want to have a bunch of different descriptions so people can say, oh, you know what? Kristen lives a life that I'm really into. I would love to follow her path, and this is what her path looks like, and here's how she defines success. So in that vein, how would you define success?
That's really good. There's two types of successful people in my mind, happy and fulfilled, or successful and burnt out. And so to me, fulfillment is the key to success. No matter what you're doing, if you feel fulfilled, that's the most important thing. And that's what I always try to prioritize for me, no matter what I'm doing. I'm like, okay, does this lead to my fulfillment or burnout? And so to define success purely, I'm like, that's a good question.
I love fulfillment though, because that's so
living your best and living your best, most fulfilled life, whatever that is to you, because I know some people who may not have achieved a lot, but they were full of peace, full of happiness, full of joy, because achievement wasn't as important to them as it might be to me. So their definition of success is different.
what's so great about that is it's exactly the point you just made, is that everyone receives fulfillment in their own unique ways, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's ultimately what I'm trying to get at with the definition of success, is that you can't really look outside of yourself to answer that question, because
Yeah.
everyone's going to view it differently, and fulfillment very much is that way. Like everyone has a different way to fill their fulfillment bucket. And so if you can just find out what that is for you and be in pursuit of that thing, it would be hard pressed to not look back and feel successful if you were in constant pursuit of fulfillment.
Yeah. Life wants expansion. And so we always just have to look, what's that next level of expansion for us? And when we can continue to do that and grow, that's where the excitement is. That's where the joy is and the fulfillment. When we're stuck in static, we're unhappy, we're unfulfilled, that's not success. But then when we're constantly chasing and constantly going and we're burning ourselves out, that's not fulfilling either. So it's that careful balance of what that looks like for you.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Nail on the head. It's the balance, right? Finding that perfect place between growth and joy, because sometimes growing is joyful, but sometimes it's not, and sometimes you need to pull back so you can take time to enjoy the fruits of your labor. So
Yeah.
I know for you, were just in New York for the past week. I'm sure you're happy to be home now, and that's a different level of joy than seeing yourself on the billboard in New York is.
Yeah, you just have to make the best of everything. Certainly living where there's tons of mountains and forest, and then going to a city that's a concrete jungle. But I had to find what brought me joy. I went to Central Park. I went over to the river and explored that area. And then I also enjoyed the city. So just being grateful for where you are and finding elements that you love in that moment is what matters.
I have a great Central Park story. I was there with Megan and the kids a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago, and we're walking through Central Park, and it was starting to get dark, and we don't have fireflies where I live, so I've never seen a firefly before.
Mm.
And on this path, there's all these fireflies, and it's like we're in Central Park, but it was just us on this path, like winding through these trees, and there's fireflies everywhere, and it's starting to get dark, and we're like, oh, this is so cool. And then like we get out of the trees and turn the corner, and turns out it was like only the second time in 70 years that New York City had a power outage. All the power down in the city. So all the lights are off. And it was the craziest
Wow.
experience. And so we went to our hotel, and we're on like the 64th floor, and there was only one service elevator that was like running on a generator that could get you up, and they had to have a special key to get you in your room. And so we're waiting for like an hour or so for our opportunity to get on the service elevator. And I tell Megan, I'm like, I just got to go outside and see if it's different, what it looks like. Like, it's just so cool. And she's like, if the elevator comes, you're going to miss it. I was like, I'm not going to miss it. So like the line's wrapped around this part of the hallway. And so I go out the door, and I come back, and the line's gone, and my heart sinks, because that means I'm going to have to climb 64 stories to get back up to where my wife and kids are. But
Oh,
thank God the elevator doors were just about to close, and I was able to pop into it. And it's like they had to like take us to our room by flashlight, and it was a really cool experience,
wow.
because it's not something that many people will ever see in their life, is New York City completely out of power.
Wow. I had no idea that even happened. That's
Yeah,
incredible to experience that. Wow.
it was
And
quite the experience.
64 floors. Were you close by Central Park though?
Yeah, we were only like a few
Yeah.
blocks away,
Yeah.
but just being in the park, because like we weren't cognizant of it since we were in all the trees. But then once you came, because then like none of the lights are working, and so then there was like a little bit of that chaos, and it was like a scary for a second of like, oh man, is chaos gonna ensue? Because like there's nothing. But overall, it was just a very unique and cool experience.
Wow.
Okay, well, Kristen, thank you so much for being willing to join with me today. What an amazing time. Like, in fact, I forgot who I had as my guest this week. And so I looked at it on like Monday and saw it was you. And I was like, oh, this is incredible. The week she has her picture on the billboard, like, there's not a better time to have Kristen on the podcast. This is so exciting. But for the listeners who are listening, if they love your message and are interested in learning more about positivity, like, what are the recommended ways for them to engage with you and your content? Where should they go to get after that?
Yeah, we were talking about Instagram. So at Positive Kristen is my Instagram handle, and at Power of Positivity is my brand handle. That's a great place.
And then are your books just anywhere that you want to buy a book? Do you have a preferred platform that you prefer they purchase on? Is it better to do it from you or Amazon, Barnes and Noble? Where would you prefer if they were to go
Yeah.
buy those books for them to get them from you?
Yeah, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, your local bookstore, they're in a lot of places. So wherever you love to purchase books, that's where they are.
What a cool thing to go into a bookstore and see your book.
Yeah, we did that while we were in New York City, and it was amazing because we went to the flagship Barnes and Noble and they had what, 3 copies. And I was so excited, right? Because I was also in Woman's World magazine. And so I grabbed a Woman's World copy. There I am. And then I'm grabbing my books and I'm in this like really elated state. And this lady's like looking at me like, she's not impressed. And I said to her, you probably get authors in here all the time being the flagship Barnes and Noble. And she's like, oh yeah, all day. Because it's just so cool to go in and sign your books, right?
I know I'm only in digital retail, but it's like I want to take a stack of my books and just put them in Barnes and Noble and just look at it and be like, yeah, there it is. That's as close
It'll
as I'm gonna
happen
get.
and you'll have that moment and you'll be like, wow,
Yeah.
it's definitely a pinch me type of moment for
Oh,
sure.
for sure. I'm looking forward to it. Well, Kristen, again, thank you so much for being with us. I'll be sure to put all of those links in the show notes. I really appreciate you and your time. And I think positivity is such an important place, especially like in today's world. You've got to find the ability to see the positivity in things. And so I love your journey. I love that you built such an incredible following. And I appreciate the time you shared with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And you're an incredible speaker, so keep going. I'm excited to see more that you're doing and all the success.
Thank you. All right. That's a wrap. Thank you. That was great. What do you think?
Yeah, you're a great host. Thank you. Thank you for taking on the storytelling. See?
No problem. Well, I will let you go. Enjoy being home. I'm sure your husband and kids are, and your cute little dog you have in the background there are super, super excited to have you home. And congratulations on all your success. I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you. You too. You take care.
All right. See you, Kristen.
Hello to Megan for me.
I will. Absolutely.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.